So I wanted to ask you. You talked very convincingly about the question of land, meaning geography, and the question of memory, meaning history. And I wanted to ask you about this third pillar that you obviously is a thread through many of your works, which is people, and in particular your work on the UN and Resolution 194, for example. And if I may, I want to just quote the kind of key part of the UN General Assembly Resolution 194, which resolves that, quote, refugees wishing to return to their homes and live at peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date, and that compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return and for loss or damage of property which, under principles of international law or equity, should be made good by the governments or authorities responsible. And this is, so this is one of the very, very early UN General Assembly resolutions. And of course, this embodies the idea of the right of return or compensation of one form or the other. And you've written your mapping. Um, it is so. On the one hand, I want to ask you about this history of this Resolution 194, and on the other hand, I want to connect it to perhaps is what you're most well known for, which are these maps that then tell us, that explain to us, for those that say this is fantasy, this is just some kind of idea. Yeah, you want to talk about right of return, but I mean that's not possible, and you're dreaming, and it's kind of silly, except for some romantic, idealistic notion, but that you have mapped in unbelievably, painfully minute ways, and with facts, how it is that people, or at least a large chunk of people, can simply pick up and almost literally walk back to where they are, and that those lands that they were kicked out of were in fact are quite, the lands are there, they've been destroyed, but the land itself is there, so it wouldn't even require what one might think, this kind of large displacement of Zionists that came afterwards and settled. So can you talk a little about this connection between 194 and in particular this idea of the practical possibilities of return?
Right. Thank you, Karim. 194 um, is an integral part of the United Nations legal history. It was passed by the United Nations on 11 December 1948, one day after passing Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the right of return, or Resolution 194, emphasizing the right of return, is not inventing any new fact. It's simply emphasizing a basic fact that everybody must be allowed to return. Article 13, every person is allowed to return to his home. Now, in terms of United Nations, it's the longest standing resolution in its history. So far, it has been affirmed 135 times. And only because of the intransigence and the opposition of the Western colonial countries, it was not applied. But for Palestinians, it is sacred in every heart. It's legal, as you can see. And the question remains, is it feasible or not? So it started in a study whether it is feasible or not, because some European friends of mine say, we agree with you, but now are you going to create a Jewish Nakba? How could you do that? How could people return without a great disaster for others? And I think this answer by them is racist. If people take your home and kick you out and kill half of your family, and you say, I want my home back, and they say to you, how could you? There are people who killed you are in your home, and are you going to kick them out? Of course, this is a racist concept, but from practical point of view, let us answer that. We did a detailed study, as you mentioned, village by village, where their land area, and who actually lives who are the Israelis who live in their land. This is in part mentioned in new atlas called Return Journey Atlas, where we have the map of Palestine villages. On top of that, the existing settlements and roads which the Israelis built. So anyone today can see the road Israelis built leading to their village, and they know what it is. When we examine the population, the Israeli population who live um, in Palestine 48 or 40 or Israel, we even tried to classify them, whether they are Ashkenazis, whether they are Russians, or whether they are Mizrahi Arab Jews, because there is the geographical distribution of that. And surprising result I arrived at, and Miron Benvenisti mentioned that in his book, that how could the Palestinians find out that 88% of village sites today are vacant. Are vacant. Why? Because Jews still live in urban areas slightly larger in the area they lived in during the British Mandate. And they are in the coast. And the absolute majority of them still live there. The Our village land is taken by two parties. One, the kibbutz, and their population is 1 to 2% of population, and the other is 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 the Israeli army is taking over all the land. 88% of Palestine 48, which is Israel today, is vacant, effectively vacant, meaning that the people who use it are the kibbutz, who are 1 to 2% of population, and the vast majority of the land is taken by the army. And the Israelis live in only 12% of the area of Israel. In fact, if you take out public areas like gardens and roads, they live in 2.5% of the land. And this area where they concentrate in are very clearly metropolitan Tel Aviv and Jaffa, Haifa and around it, and West Jerusalem. We have found this out by actual calculation of the population who live in each area, and now it is confirmed by Israeli survey. They later give the same results like that. Um, we have in our plan for the return of the refugees, I have suggested that the Jews who are willing to shed Zionism, they can live like any normal citizen in our country, uh, and therefore they can have cultural and religious freedom in three cantons: Canton Tel Aviv, larger Tel Aviv, Canton 2 Haifa, Canton 3 West Jerusalem. This will house about 87% or more of the Jews in Israel today. Uh, Therefore, there is no physical problem uh, of housing people who would like to live in Palestine without being Zionists. We have to add one thing more. Uh, Let me give you an example. We have in the news the genocide in Gaza today. Who are the people in Gaza? Who are the refugees? They are the original population of 342, 247 villages in southern and central Palestine. These people, whose land is about 50% of Palestine, are pushed into 1% of Palestine, which is Gaza Strip. Now, I made a study which I can send to you of who are the settlers taking their land, part of which, of course, are so called hostages. You know how many live in the land of 2 million Palestinians? 150,000. I can list them for you, um, each about 212 kibbutz. And the total of all these settlers in southern Palestine is less than the population of one Rafah camp, only one camp in Gaza Strip. So there, the population in Gaza density of population is 8,000 persons per kilometer. And what is the population of the settlers who are taking their land? It's only 5 persons per square kilometer. I am one of them, as I said. They, my land where I was born, they built Narim kibbutz on it, which is 2 kilometers from the armistice line of Gaza. So, if, as I said, if I was younger and in Gaza, um, I would have crossed the barrier to go to my birthplace, in which settlers in a kibbutz called Narim. I chased who lives in this kibbutz, Narim. Turned out to be led by a woman called Adeli Rema. She is from the Bronx, and she comes and lives in my home place. And she writes all the time how the Palestinians in Gaza are disturbing her.